signs. And where this really helps a bit is it touches on, and again, we're not too aggressive in terms of enforcement in this area, but signs are prohibited if they're on natural features like a stone wall, utility poles, utility boxes, traffic signs, fences, and other highway structures. You cannot affix a political sign or a residential sign of any nature to those structures. But in addition, when it comes to vehicles, so this is a catch, and I know there have been various candidates and parties over the years that have taken advantage of this. You cannot lean a large sign up against your vehicle. So at the polling place, for example, you can't pull a vehicle in and lean up against it, but you can paint it on. The larger sign can be affixed to a vehicle. You can wrap a vehicle. All of those things are actually permitted. Where the nuance comes into play is that all of the polling places are on public property, so that ultimately signs are not, these types of signs, residential type signs, are not allowed on public property. They're not allowed on the public right-of-way, state or local residential property and the municipal level. So those are a couple of the nuances where I think people get fooled at times by what they can and can't do. But Noreen, I know you mentioned something about parking, and Elaine had as well. And so I think another area that we touch on that at times gets a little bit tricky, it's how individuals and groups and parties, representatives park their vehicles on public property at the polling place. So we, in managing the community and managing its property at any of the schools or at Swift Gymnasium or at Town Hall, will be enforcing how we line and how we park vehicles. So we would be asking for anybody with a larger vehicle not to park across several spaces with a trailer or a large RV. You need to park legally, and your signage on those vehicles needs to be legal in terms of the zoning ordinance for signs. So, fortunately, we have a little bit of time, so I'm hoping people get to take a look at this Zoom meeting and take a look at the recording. And we'll be happy to answer questions and help them get to a place where they're going to be legal and they can be above board and don't have to run into any issues. But there's a lot more depth, which I'm not going to get into tonight, which I will admit at times can be a bit confusing for somebody who opens up our zoning code and starts to read the zoning ordinance, especially when it comes to commercial property, because every single commercial zone, based on it being in a developed commercial area, an individual piece of property, all have different size restrictions that fall into place. So that would be something that the more complicated cases would want individuals to reach out to Ernie Marinaro, our zoning enforcement official, and he'll be able to kind of hold their hand and kind of walk right through the code and get them to the place they need to be, just so that they don't run into any issues on election day or leading up to it. So I'm going to leave it at there, because I think to get into any more detail tonight might be a little complicated. But if I can just accentuate the point to the public, that if they have questions, or any of the party representatives that might be on tonight, to just make that call to Mr. Marinaro or to the Board of Canvassers, and we'll make sure we get the accurate information to them in a timely fashion. Thank you.
All righty, thank you very much. Does anybody else from the board have anything to add with regards to the signs and the sign ordinance and regulations?
Yes, I do. This is Gene.
Okay, go ahead, Gene.
Is Ernie going to enforce the signs physically, like before the day of, like on the 3rd or the 2nd? Is he going to physically enforce any of these restrictions?
Yeah, the best we can, Gene. So, I think a lot of times communities like ours, we get overwhelmed. As Noreen was mentioning, there will be hundreds, if not thousands, of signs in various locations, and especially in the larger communities. And you do the best you can, but anything on a right of way, and the parties should be aware of that, on the entrance to Avenger Drive or other places like that, that is within the right of way, that is public property. Signs should not be located in those places. And I understand they carry some visible value to the individual candidates, but they can appropriately and legally be placed on private property leading up to the poll. But if they can work with us and keep them off public property, that would go a long way. Because I think, Gene, as you're mentioning, Ernie does the best he can, and he will he will take down hundreds of signs, but they reappear as fast as we seem to take them down.
So Noreen and I've been doing it, of course. What I'll do is I'll take the signs and just place them flat on the ground so they can take them and do what they want. But, it's a lot of work in the morning when trying to get things up and going for the polls and things. So,
Of course.
About parking, I would ask that the candidates, if I see that the head of one of the parties is with us, they know that they're going to be at the polls most of the day. If they cannot take the best parking spaces in front of the polls, it would be really helpful to the voters, because we want to get as many as we can in there. And a lot of them are elderly, and the closer they can park to getting into the polls. So it's just a courtesy thing that we'd like to ask them to ask their people to do.
All righty, thank you very much. Is there anybody else? Lee?
Yeah, just wanted to go back to signs, like Jean said. In the past, there have been efforts to remove and collect signs, and I think that the spot that they get placed, if they're not laid down flat, is like the DPW garage or something. Like, where would people go to get their signs if they were in fact removed, or should they just call Ernie, or what would be the best way to handle that?
Yeah, Lee, at this point, I think Ernie is keeping them at the Public Works office at 111 Pierce, in that vicinity. But I think if there's a large number of them, I think they might be at multiple locations. They are valuable, and sometimes candidates reuse them. So they're definitely something that we're not disposing of. We're actually holding on to them to be able to return them. Ernie will typically make a call to that candidate and or property owner, if it happens to be adjacent to a property, to let them know so that they can return them appropriately. But I think initially, Ernie, as the zoning enforcement official, should be the one who ends up with the signs.
Okay, thank you.
and also when I was campaigning, the state took some signs and they put them in the state DPW garage in the back over in Coventry area, Coventry, West Warwick, East Greenwich line, by the McDonald's on exit 6 or something like that. So I know that the state does it too. If there's some state roads, they'll pull them out and take them to the DPW state, and you can find them. They're all piled up typically. Like you said, they're expensive, so
Right.
you try to get them back.
Yeah, the state does do that. They usually notify the candidates that they will pull up signs that are on state property, on the state highway, different things like that. So if nobody else has anything to add with regards to signs, we can move on to item B, which is campaigning at the polling location on election day. So do you want to address this, Noreen?
Well, there's so much to address. Everybody knows that it's 50 foot from the polling place, but it all depends on where they're considering 50 foot. We don't mind them standing there. We don't want them talking to people, but when they leave the area and start chasing people down to their cars to give them things and kind of interfering with somebody's space by kind of getting in their face, that really is not good.
Yeah, from the rule is it should be 50 feet from the entrance to the building. It's not just 50 feet from the entrance to the polling location inside the building. Like at Frenchtown, it's in the gymnasium. It's actually 50 feet from the entrance to the building. So the poll workers come and they mark off a 50-foot circle outside the entrance, and they make every effort to keep it marked. And that's the rule that we need to follow. You have to be outside that 50 feet in order to do any kind of campaigning. Another thing that people had questions on is if a candidate goes to vote at a polling location, if they're wearing their campaign buttons, campaign t-shirts, whatever that may be, they are allowed to go into the polling location with that campaign t-shirt on and vote their ballot. As long as it's their precinct, they can go in and vote their ballot. Then they must leave immediately. They cannot hang around the polling location inside with their t-shirt on. So then, once they vote, they need to leave the building and go outside the 50 feet again. Another thing is that if they bring leaflets in with them or any kind of pamphlets or postcards, they're not allowed to leave them on the, in the polling location anywhere at the privacy booths. The poll workers are asked to go around every now and then and look at the privacy booths. And if they find any leaflets there, they're supposed to pick them up and collect them. They're not supposed to be left in the privacy booths. I think another thing that Noreen may have wanted to address is people who are assisting the candidates, maybe young children or maybe teenagers that get really excited about the election. So I think Noreen may want to address that.
Yeah, I know these kids are helpful, and I know they're anxious, and they're good for about a half an hour, and then it wears off. And I found kids, especially coming out of Hannaford School, that were all the way out on Middle Road, and nobody knew they were out there. I mean, their parents had no clue where they were. So if the kids are going to be at the polls with them, that's fine, but they're going to kind of have to watch them, because we don't want any kids hurt.
Right, right. Anybody else have anything to address with regards to campaign courtesy or the 50-foot rule? Any of the board members want to address that?
Are we gonna have the small cones out there for the 50-foot rule? We talked about the little small cones. So if there's a, if it rains or something, hopefully we'll be able to still keep that 50-foot distance out in the polling areas.
Right, we do have the, we're borrowing the cones from DPW, and we also have some yellow tape that says no campaigning beyond this point. So it will be very well marked on election day. So hopefully there won't be any question as to where that 50-foot mark is.
Excellent.
Okay, if nobody else has anything else to address on that, the next thing we are moving on to is election offenses. There were a couple things that Lee added onto the agenda just for some informational items, if you want to address those, Lee.
Yep, just the law itself I attached as backup to the agenda. If not, you got anybody that wants to look at it can look it up on the general laws website. But just a reminder, because everybody's been asking about applying for a mail ballot and they want to change their mind, and certainly not insinuating anything, but just that we're encouraging folks to follow through with the mail ballot process. And there were also some concerns about, Elaine, help me out on this one, like when the people come in, say if somebody came in today that was not registered and they wanted to register and vote for president and vice president.
Yes.
They're not in the poll pad, so it's a paper process.
Right.
That they could technically jump borders, and it's just and then they would be arrested, and that's easily traceable. So
Right.
just throwing it out there. And I think this whole election season really needs to be based on patience and courtesy. So really just a kind of reminder that we're all in this together. A lot of people are excited and super sensitive and nervous about COVID. So we just need to take things really slow and be kind to one another. And that's really kind of what I wanted to get at as far as this item. So thank you.
What about the mask issues coming into the polling areas?
We are going to ask that voters come in with a mask. The Board of Elections does supply us with a box of the disposable masks, and it is okay for the poll workers to offer one to a voter as they're coming in. If a voter is coming in not wearing a mask, the poll worker can offer them a disposable mask for use while they're in the polling location. Obviously, if they say that they have a medical reason for not wearing a mask, we really cannot enforce them to wear it. That's part of the Department of Health rules, but we can, ask very kindly and nicely, say, if while you're in here, could you please wear the mask? And hopefully, so far, everybody that's come into Town Hall has abided by that, and it's been very well received. The poll workers are also trained in their supervisor training with the Board of Elections to go through and clean off the privacy booths on a fairly regular basis. They are asked to wear a mask at all times, and we are also providing the plexiglass dividers so that it helps protect the voter as well as the poll workers. So I don't know if anybody else has anything to address with regards to that. Our next item on the agenda was the parking, which we did kind of address that a little bit, the parking at the polling locations and being courteous of others. And if you're going to be there for a good length of time, to kind of park a little bit away from the area so that the elderly and the voters that can't get around very well can park a little bit closer to the polling location. So I don't know if anybody else has anything to address with that and add to the parking courtesy. Is there anyone else from the board that thinks we need to add anything else to some of the information that we're passing on to the candidates and the attendees?
But one little thing, and it's not a big thing. I know a lot of the candidates are in and out of the town hall here because they're doing business. But what they don't think of is that they should be 50 feet away from the chambers right now, is because it is a polling place. So if they come in, we ask them not to kind of hang around in the hall downstairs.
Okay, well, I think we've basically addressed everything on our agenda. We do have 4 attendees at the meeting. So I don't know if any of our attendees have any questions that they would like to ask of any of the board members or the town clerk, myself, or the town manager. Please feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions, and hopefully we can answer them for you. And if not, we can maybe find out the answer for you. So if there's anybody that has any questions, please feel free to address the board now. Okay, Wendy, we have Krista Thompson has her hand raised.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, Krista.
Yes.
So I'm the chair of the East Greenwich Town Democratic Committee, and I don't have a question. I just want to thank you guys for all your work. I know it has not been easy. Things are constantly changing. Elaine and Lee have been rock stars through this whole process. So I really publicly want to thank them for their work, and for the Board of Canvassers. I know you guys have your work cut out for you. So, if I can help going forward, or the committee can help, please, give me, Elaine has my number, but I really do want to thank you. I know it hasn't been easy. So I know you guys are working hard, and so I just publicly wanted to say thanks, and that's it. No questions from me.
Thank you, Krista. We appreciate that.
Thank you very much, Krista. That's really heartfelt, honestly. Thanks.
Okay, is there anybody else that's an attendee that may have any questions for the board? Please feel free to raise your hand and address, and we can hopefully answer your questions. Okay, well, I don't see anybody with any hands raised, but what you need to be aware of too is that the board members and Lee and myself are always available. Send us an email. We'll be glad to answer any questions you might have. If we cannot answer the question, the Board of Elections and the Secretary of State's office is always at a beck and call to us. We've reached out to them several times with some questions and they're very, very good at getting back to us. So if we don't have any other questions and nothing else to address, then we can call for an adjournment to the meeting. Is there a board member that wants to call to adjourn the meeting?
I'll call
Make a
for the
motion.
agenda.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn in a second. All those in favor, you can announce your name and say aye.
Aye.
Jean
Aye.
says aye.
Aye.
Peter says aye. Noreen?
I say aye.
Okay, Noreen says aye. And Mary Ellen? Okay, we have a unanimous decision. So we will call the meeting adjourned at 7:28, and I thank everybody for attending tonight.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Aye.
Great job, Elaine.
Thanks.